interpersonal communication. Communication in close relationships. So there are a lot of reasons why we form relationships. Um, Appearance. People are more likely to show romantic interest in people they consider physically attractive, which should be pretty obvious. Similarity. We like people similar to us. Researchers speculate that similarities are comfortable, and they may also reduce our fear that the other person will reject us. Um, One thing that I'll say relative to the world of the job with interpersonal relationships, if in a job interview, if you're being interviewed and you can connect to a person through a hobby, if you were a Boy Scout or you played basketball or if you go muskie fishing, and that the interviewer did as well, it's more likely that they will like you. Also, another reason is complementarity. Differences strengthen a relationship when they are complementary. When each partner's characteristics can satisfy the other's needs. So, for example, if you marry someone and you are not very outgoing, but they are, that can be an advantage to you because maybe they're the ones that call and deal with the gas company when the bill's wrong, and you don't like dealing with that. And so there are many reasons, to form relationships, and when we do so, it really is to our advantage, or we think it is to our advantage. It's also reciprocal attraction. We are attracted to people who like us, generally speaking. We probably don't care for people who clearly dislike or seem indifferent to us. A competence. We like to be around talented people, probably in the hopes their skills and abilities will rub off on us. On the other hand, we don't like to be around people who are too competent. And it says comparison is the thief of joy. And basically, a lot of times people feel uncomfortable. For example, they perceive that someone is a lot more intelligent than they are. Disclosure. So if you reveal important information about yourself, that can build liking. When people share private information with you, it suggests they respect and trust you. However, disclosure can also be used by nefarious people to gain trust. So that's something to consider. Some other reasons. Proximity. Often proximity leads to liking. Shared experiences, similar circumstances, or some of the rationale contribute to this phenomenon. That's why a lot of times people from small towns will marry with each other. They have shared experiences. They know each other well. And rewards is another reason. Rewards is how rich old guys end up with young supermodels. And this is understood in a socioeconomic model called social exchange theory. So we will seek out people who can give us rewards greater or equal to the costs we encounter in dealing with them. Some characteristics of interpersonal communication. When people treat one another as unique individuals, regardless of context. Online relationships can provide opportunities for establishing depth and maintaining relationships as well, or not. We have content and relational messages. Content messages focus on the subject being discussed. Relational messages make statements about how the parties feel about each other. There is communication over the relational lifespan, and this is the happy part, one might say. And you initiate, you experiment, it intensifies, you integrate, and bond. And this can be romantic or platonic. And then the sad part, differentiate, circumscribe, communication between members decreases in quality and quantity, stagnates, avoids, terminate. And if it's a personal relationship, back to the old drawing board. So you think about a dialectical perspective, and that's either or. And you think of yin and yang. Karl Marx was famous for this. And you think of connection versus autonomy in relationships. No man is an island, obviously, but research on relational breakups demonstrates the consequences for relational partners who can't find a way to manage personal needs. So in other words, it's good to have partners. It's also good to have your own time. Predictability versus novelty. Stability is important, but it can be dull. Novelty is awesome, right up until your wife finds a more exciting guy. Openness versus privacy. Even the strongest interpersonal relationships require some distance. Also, no one tells anyone everything. So that's another balance in interpersonal relationships. As far as intimacy, dimensions of intimacy have four qualities. You have physical intimacy, intellectual exchanges, emotional disclosure, and shared activities. You can have some or all of these, depending on your relationship. It's important to remember that even the closest relationships do not always operate at the highest level of intimacy. And in fact, I would say it's unlikely that someone would be able to have all these dimensions of intimacy at a high level with someone else. If you think about males and females, they have different intimacy styles. Most research shows women are more willing than men to share their thoughts and feelings. I'm sure that comes as no great surprise to you. Research also shows men closest grows from activities that don't depend heavily on disclosure. So for men, a friend is a person who does things for you and with you. So it's the guy that goes fishing with you, not the person you tell your deepest, darkest secrets to. Differences create misunderstandings. For example, many women think of sex as a way to express intimacy that is already developed, while men are more likely to see it as a way to create or sustain intimacy. Self-disclosure is important in interpersonal relationships, and it's the process of deliberately revealing information about oneself. It's influenced by culture. Some cultures are more close to the vest than others. It usually occurs only in pairs. Effective self-disclosure is usually symmetrical and occurs incrementally. So in other words, I disclose something, you disclose something, and then this disclosure ramps up relative to secrecy as we go, as to revealing secrets. It is relatively scarce. Usually there's an imbalance. Some guidelines for self-disclosure. Is the other person important to you? Is the risk of disclosing reasonable? If you're working at some place, you probably don't want to disclose, generally speaking, the time where you had some sort of mental breakdown, for example. So is that amount and type of disclosure appropriate? Is it relevant? Is the disclosure reciprocated? You don't want to be in a relationship where you're disclosing everything and the other person is disclosing nothing. Will the effect be constructive? Sometimes, as they say, TMI, too much information, can be bad for relationships. And is the self-disclosure clear and understandable? It says don't enable stalking when possible. So if you disclose personal things to people, understand that they will assume that you have some sort of personal relationship. All right. Small issue there, but now we're back. Lies. There's a lie that I was going to do everything right in this PowerPoint. People lie all the time, and this is shown in research. Sometimes to gain an unfair advantage, sometimes for altruistic reasons. You don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. It says people lie while getting acquainted an average of 3 times in a 10-minute period. Lying varies by relationship. College students tell at least one lie to their mothers in fully half their conversations. There are consequences. Deception threatens relationships, but not all lies are equally devastating. Regardless, if preserving a relationship is important, then so is being honest. Going with lying is equivocation. When faced with the choice between lying and telling an unpleasant truth, many people choose to equivocate. I think your painting is unique. Your son has some very good qualities, if he can't catch the football. I think that you have a very nice personality, if I don't find you attractive. People often choose to equivocate rather than outright lie. It prevents embarrassment, it saves feelings, and keeps you out of trouble without being outright dishonest. Hints are more direct than equivocal statements, but we all do this as well. Hints seek to get a desired response from others. If you're really thinking I'm bored and want to out of here, you say, you must be busy, I better let you go. If you don't like someone smoking, you'll say, I don't think they allow smoking here. Hint, hint. I don't want to go to the movie with you becomes, I really don't watch movies all that much. What of all this stuff? Hints, benign lies, and equivocations are relatively ethical alternatives to self disclosure. Some people argue, and I tend to agree with this, that the morality of a speaker's motives ought to be judged. Why you told that white lie is, at least in my opinion and the opinion of others, more important than the fact that you weren't being 100% truthful. Evasion is effective, but the question, of course, is to ask whether it is the only way to behave in a current situation. If it isn't, honesty is the best policy.